So the big thing with the Brexit press this week is that we've got we've got a trade deal with Japan. However, that's not exactly completely true. You see, what it actually is a continuity agreement. It's not actually a trade deal. It's just we'll roll some stuff over and then we'll have negotiations. Now, the whole thing to try and praise it as a trade deal is that they are desperate at this moment. The government will be desperate as of next year to start to show what the wins of Brexit there are. And trust me, there is going to be a lot of anger next year. And this is one of the things that they are going to try and sell, not only then, but now, to try and prove, look how wonderful it is. Now, already earlier than this week, we've been over the video from the Japanese Times about the Japanese view of this trade deal. And they were very, very explicit in the fact that the agreement they have with the European Union is far more attractive and better, not only for businesses trading into Europe or vice versa, meaning that European businesses will just out-edge the British businesses and interest in Japan. And remember, this trade deal that we're doing is only going to add, say it with me, 0.07%. And that's nothing. What, again, these people are trying to do is that they are being so desperate to try and replace all our losses that we are going to get from the European Union. And trust me, those losses are going to be huge and very, very noticeable, that they are trying to get all these other trade deals. And even if you take on the American trade deal, which is going to be like 0.2%, and all these other trade deals, which are literally like which are always like less than 0.0%, they're not going to be worth anything. Why? Because we've talked about it before. Trade gravity is a thing. Countries always trade the most biggest trading partners are always the ones close together. That for us is the EU. That ain't going to change. You know, the EU ain't going anywhere, despite how people still say, oh, the EU's not going to be here in 5 years. Well, roll back time, you were saying that 5 years ago, and 5 years before that, and 5 years before that. Your prophecy of that the EU is going to somehow magically disappear at a set time frame has never come true. But the silliness gets completely even more stupid, because we've had this today. So, this comes to the New European, and it is basically this. Liz Truss wants Japanese post-Brexit trade deal to reference Stilton cheese to prove it's better than the deal we already had, which is the European-Japanese agreement, which again ends at the end of this year. So the UK and Japanese negotiators have already reached a preliminary deal during recent talks in London in what Downing Street has been bigging up as the first post-Brexit trade deal. But after reaching an agreement on auto tariffs and financial services, International Trade Secretary Liz Truss has insisted that Britain's iconic cheese, Stilton, be added to the final deal. Truss is known as a staunch defender of Britain's cheese industry, once declaring the country's declaring the country's importing of cheese a disgrace. According to the Nikkei Asian Review, the business newspaper, British farmers are pressuring Boris Johnson to beg preferential treatment for one of Britain's most loved cheeses because they fear it could be hit hard by the imminent loss of EU subsidies. Japan has already promised to phase out tariffs on hard cheese by 2033, but it refused to do the same for soft varieties. The FT writes that he's reportedly reluctant to offer a better terms than it gave the EU, which has combined provision 7 times greater than Britain's. So let's just go over that again. It is reluctant to offer better terms than the European deal because the EU has a greater combined population, 7 times greater than Britain's. This argument should be nothing new. We've said this multiple times. Why on earth are countries going to give us a better trade deal when there is a vastly bigger market sitting on our front doorstep called the European Union and the single market? Britain exported over 80 million of blue cheese globally last year, the FT said. And citing data from the Agricultural and Horticultural Department Board, just over 100,000 of that went to Japan. Truss is now reportedly hoping to point to Japanese concessions over Stilton as proof that Britain has improved on the EU's trade deal with Japan. Again, it's not going to be anywhere near as good a trade deal. And we know this. I mean, when it fully comes out, it will be picked apart to show just how bad it is compared to the deal that we left. And trust me, we will go over that when it happens. So officials in Japan have not denied the claims, but remained confident that a deal would be reached by the end of August. In the statement on the progress of talks, Truss said, "We have reached a consensus on the major elements of a deal, including the ambitious provisions in areas like digital, data and financial services that go significantly beyond the EU-Japan deal." Now, of course, that's just a big lie. She's trying to big it up, because there is no way at all Japan would go, yeah, we're going to give you a better deal than the EU. And they have been very, very firm on that. So we know that that statement of that it goes significantly beyond the EU-Japan deal is going to be roundly false. And of course, the trade deal with Japan is expected to add 0.07% to Britain's GDP after Brexit. Which, when you're talking GDP numbers, is nothing. Because of the coronavirus, the GDP of Britain has been wiped out by 20%. In fact, some experts have recently said that because of this whole austerity thing that the Tories put us on, not only has it wiped out all the progress from the austerity, but it has taken us back to a even worse than a 2008 crash level. Not only that, but a study of the recent G7 countries also said that we were going to have the longest recession of any other country because of our government programs have focused on austerity rather than investment. And again, the EU is not to blame for that. If you want someone who has been actually investing in this country, for example, they only a couple of weeks ago, the EU reached a deal on its new budget, and it was really, really very ambitious, because compared to our plan of the new towns budget, which the Conservatives then doled out to good Conservative areas, and it was used politically, not to the areas and towns that needed it most, the EU's budget is going to be given to the areas that have a lower GDP so that they can be brought up comparatively to the other areas. And because we have a lot of lower income areas, especially in the north and all those areas that voted for Brexit, if we were in the EU, that budget that they announced that we would have contributed to as well, we would have significantly benefited unanimously from that money. And that wouldn't have been doled out political level. It would have been doled out on the areas that have a very low GDP, which would be the north of England and all the areas that voted for Brexit. But, you know, we said that before. We've said that multiple times now, again and again. Sooner or later, it will sink in, and sooner or later, there will be the question asked of why haven't we got money to do all this? And the council's just going to turn around and just say, well, the government won't give us any money for it. And when they say, well, hang on, that town over there got money, there's going to be a lot of anger. There really is.